Hi everyone, how's it going? I hope you're good. So yes, in today's video, I'm going to be doing a comparison between the Insta360 One R and the Insta360 One X. These are the two Insta360 cameras that are available now. These are the two main ones. Obviously, the One R is the sequel to the One X, which was actually my favorite ever 360 camera that I've ever used. So we're gonna see basically if it's worth upgrading, if it's worth spending the money to get the Insta360 One R. Now, I've owned the One X basically since it was released a couple years ago, and I've had the One R since before it was released, so I know the two cameras pretty well. I've used them both a lot. In fact, I've just been to Hawaii with the One R. I'm going to be showing you a lot of footage from that in the next few weeks, and I'm going to be doing a full review on this camera pretty soon. The pros of the One X is that it comes with a really easy to use app that allows you to create really good videos, awesome effects, very quickly, very intuitively. It's very thin, light, and easy to use. It has that guaranteed invisible selfie stick effect, which is very popular, allows you to create these kind of floating camera effects. And it features really awesome stabilization technology, so even if you are moving a lot with this camera, it will be able to stabilize your footage pretty much perfectly. Now, as for the cons of this camera, for a start, it's very vulnerable. The lenses are really easy to break. If you drop the camera, you will probably smash the lenses, and there are no way to replace them. It's not natively waterproof, so if you wanted to use it in or near water, you would need to buy an accessory, a case, a waterproof case like this. There are limited shooting modes. It's really only a 360 camera, whereas there are other cameras that have multiple shooting modes. For example, can shoot in 360 and normal linear video all in one camera. And finally, it struggles in low light situations, especially when moving. So does the Insta360 One R fix any of these cons, and does it upgrade or retain the positive features? Well, let's have a look. We're going to take a look at some footage right now and see side-by-side comparisons to see which one looks better. Now, I took footage from both of these cameras, shot exactly the same time, the same location, and I put them side by side or one after the other so you can see them directly next to each other and we can see any differences. Now, to be honest, guys, the actual difference in video quality between the two isn't massive. They can both shoot the same resolution video at 5.7K. However, the One R has upgraded processing technology, so the colors are a little bit different. I think the quality is a little bit better, but the difference isn't massive. You don't have an upgrade in resolution, but you do have an upgrade in how it deals with color and light. In some situations, it is really difficult to see any difference between the two. You may see just some slightly different colors. You'll also notice some difference in the stitching line, which we will talk about later. But in these daylight comparisons, it is quite difficult to see any massively noticeable difference. Perhaps in the details, you will see slightly more details and slightly more vivid colors with the Insta360 One R. If we zoom right in, which is usually a pretty good test to see the real difference between two cameras, it is more noticeable here in this comparison, with the One R producing a lot more vivid colors and perhaps slightly more detail despite having the same resolution. You do get an upgrade in terms of video quality when using the One R. Despite having the same resolution and probably using very similar lenses, there is an upgrade in video quality. It's for you to decide whether this is big enough upgrade for you to spend the money on. Having said that, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's not all about the quality of the video. Some people would have liked to see an 8K video, which just really isn't possible for a smooth mobile workflow. We've seen with the Kucam 8K, the first, I guess, consumer 8K camera really struggling to match up to other cameras in terms of video editing capability. So that's where the Insta360 One R and One X really shine. So we can continue to look at some other videos and some other side-by-side shots. And in some situations like this one, you do notice a big difference in terms of color. I think the One R shoots more accurate color, more true to reality, more vivid and more vibrant. So I think, you know, in this situation, the difference is quite noticeable. It will really depend where you're shooting. When it comes to stabilization, which is one of the key features of both of these cameras, there hasn't really been much change, and that's a good thing. They both stabilize 360 video really well. I've only really tested them both side by side just by running and walking. I think actually the One R does a slightly better job. I think I noticed slightly less vibrations. So yeah, I think there is a little bit of an upgrade there, but for both cameras, it's going to work pretty well as an action camera. Now, the tests I've done so far have all been in well lit conditions, as you've seen. So it's all been very much daylight. It's been, you know, overcast, and these are pretty good conditions for a 360 camera. Now, when when it gets low light, when the sun goes down, when you're surrounded by artificial light, that's where the challenge lies. And that is where the Insta360 One X did struggle. I mean, in some situations it worked quite well. You can do manual controls and select the right settings, and you can get some really good low light video. However, when you're moving with the camera, it does really struggle to shoot well stabilized low light video, whereas the Insta360 One R does improve upon this somewhat. It's still not amazing. It's still not going to be shooting really high quality, like super smooth low light video. It still struggles when there are direct lights shining on it, but it is an improvement. It does much better in low light situations. It has a HDR mode, the same as the One X. But overall, the main upgrade in terms of video is definitely when shooting in low light situations with the One R. Now guys, if you've watched my channel before, you know I don't do any of this sponsored stuff. I don't do any, I say what I think, I use the camera and that's it, and I tell you what I think. I'm not here to sell you the camera, I'm not here to guarantee you what you're gonna think. I'm just literally showing you clips, saying what I think, and you can either agree with me or not. Take with a pinch of salt what anyone says, especially if they're selling the camera, if they're affiliated in any way. I mean, I post affiliate links in my description. I freely do that, but I think hopefully you can see that I am honest. Pretty much 99% of the time. I may exaggerate one feature if I think it's really good, but apart from that, I think I do a pretty good job of keeping it real. So just bear that in mind. So one of the main innovations with the One R, and I've spoken about this before in some of my other videos about this camera, is the app. I think the app is really good. It's definitely the best thing about this camera. You can do so many things. I've got a whole other video just on the app, so I can show you some clips here, footage of me using it and some of the features, but I'm not going to go into it massively. You can check out that video if you want to know more. But basically, guys, you can pretty much make full videos that would usually require something like, an advanced desktop editing software. You can do it all on the mobile app. You can color correct, you can filter, you can change speed, you can reframe really easily, you can add effect, you can merge clips together, add text, add music, all that kind of stuff. Really, really awesome. Now, that was one of my main selling features for the One R. However, it turns out that you can connect the One R app to the One X and pretty much do similar things. So that does beg the question, if you wanted a cheaper option, and if the main advantage of this camera is the app, and you can use the app with the previous camera, is there much point in upgrading? Well, I still think there is. Sometimes the app doesn't connect to the One X. It's a little bit like it's not really sure if it should or not. Let's have a look at some photos shot with these cameras, because obviously both can also shoot 360 photos, which for the One X was actually a pretty good feature. The One X could shoot DNG RAW photos at 18 megapixels, HDR photos. It wasn't as good as some professional cameras, but it did a really good job. And for Instagram, it was perfect. So yeah, let's see what the One R can do and if it can beat the One X. Actually, I might as well tell you, it can. The one reason the One R is better at photography than the One X is because of its night mode. Now, what this does is stack several, I think 8 or even more photos together. It takes them all at the same time, stacks them together, and creates a really high dynamic range photo. Now, it's called night mode because it's supposed to be used in low light situations to, bring out details and stuff, but it can be used in the daytime and indoors, and it still works really well. It's a really, really good mode. The best thing about it is that you can achieve this effect without having to edit on, in somewhere like Photoshop or Lightroom. I do think the best way to get the best out of this camera in terms of photography is to shoot DNG RAW photo and edit in Lightroom. So that's how to get the best, but obviously not everyone has that capability. So definitely when it comes to photography, the best thing about the One R is the night mode. Now, I will say when it comes to night mode, you do have to bear in mind that it's not perfect. If you have a very bright, direct light shining on it, it will struggle, as I've shown. You've probably seen in some of the examples, it will still struggle to handle that. Now, we've just been talking about 360 videos and 360 photos so far. I mean, these cameras are 360 cameras. That's what they're marketed as. However, one of them, well, the One R, is not just a 360 camera. It's also, well, it's a modular device. I mean, you all know that by now. If you know about this camera, you'll know that it can be taken apart and you can add different modules like this one, like this 4K linear module, which just allows you to shoot normal video in 4K resolution. Now, the One X can't do that. Now, the 4K module of this is supposed to be one of its main selling points. Well, you can also have a 1-inch module, and I'm sure there's going to be more in the future. So this is a major reason to buy this camera, I think. This, if you didn't want this, then I wouldn't, there's much less of a reason to upgrade. And also another big upgrade for the One R in terms of its design is the fact that it's completely waterproof up to 5 meters without the use of any case. So let's combine those two features and see what we get. I used the One R with its 4K module underwater in Hawaii. This is some of the footage that I shot. I think you'll agree it's pretty cool. I was slightly afraid whether it would actually be waterproof, but clearly it is. I was under the water for a good half an hour with my One R and it survived, and you can see this footage. Can match up, probably not quite as good as like the GoPro Hero range. I think the GoPro color technology is probably a little bit better, but it's a 4K waterproof camera. It can stabilize video, not as good as the 360 module can, but it can still stabilize. The 4K module also has more options when it comes to frame rate, so it can shoot much better slow motion. One of the main selling points of this camera is the fact that it's modular. It can shoot different types of video all in one camera. You do have to take it apart, put it back together, and do all that stuff, but it does, that is basically one of its main selling points. One criticism I do have of the design of the One R compared to the One X, I think for the most part the design is better. For a start, it has a screen, a full touch screen, which makes it way easier to use than the One X, even though that was a pretty easy camera to use. It allows for full manual control, so that is a big upgrade for me. That is a very big upgrade. A GoPro mount, so lots of accessories available for it immediately, and yeah, all in all, pretty good design. Actually, there are two issues with the design of this camera now that I think about it. The first is, I think you'll remember I mentioned one of the pros or one of the advantages of the One X is that invisible selfie stick effect. Because the area where you attach the selfie stick is perfectly placed, so to take advantage of the blind spot of the camera is completely invisible all the time, and you can't really move the camera, so it's always going to be invisible. However, the One R does not have this capability to be permanently, guaranteed invisible selfie stick effect. In order for the selfie stick to be invisible, it needs to be here. If you're going to be using it, if you're going to be, waving it around, moving about, putting it in a bag, putting it in your pocket, this can move, the camera can move. So even if it moves like that, you see it's slightly less, the selfie stick will now be visible. So that is a problem, and that is something that I found has happened to me a few times because I've just forgotten to check. So that is a downside of the design. Another downside is the fact that it's a lot thicker than the One X, as we can see here. The lenses are further apart, therefore stitching is going to be less accurate. Okay guys, I think that's it. I think that's pretty much the end of my comparison. I'm not sure how much I can tell you, without repeating myself. So in conclusion, we talked about the pros and cons of the One X. The pros, that it was thin, easy to use, shoots decent quality video. What else did we say? The invisible selfie stick effect. Now, for the most part, the One R improves upon or retains those features. And also the invisible selfie stick effect is no longer guaranteed. You do just have to check to make sure that the selfie stick is in the right place. However, when it comes to the low points or the cons of the One X, pretty much all of those have been rectified or improved upon. I mean, there are more shooting modes with the One R. You can shoot better in low light. It's now got more protection. You get a little protective lens cover. You get a little protective like this. Protect the lenses, and you get also some plastic ones to use when you're shooting. The camera is waterproof out of the box, which is a really good one for me. And also out of the blue, I mean, nobody expected this when it was first released. It's modular, so you can have basically 2 or 3 cameras in one system. But the question is now, if you can use the One R app with the One X, is it worth upgrading? I still think it is. I still think it's worth upgrading because the One X has been out now for a couple of years. It is starting to show its age. You will probably end up breaking it because it is quite vulnerable, and the advantages that come with, being waterproof, having the 4K module, having better quality video, the night mode, the potential for more expandable parts in the future, the screen, which is an important one for me. I think all of these add up to a much better camera. And despite some of the downsides, despite some of the disappointments that there inevitably are, I still think it's worth upgrading, unless you're not willing to spend how much it costs, because with all the modules, it is pretty expensive. So yeah, guys, that's it. I hope you found that useful. I know it's been a while. I haven't been making many videos, been very busy, been traveling, been having a great time. So forgive me, there are some more videos coming soon. Like I said, this travel vlog from Hawaii and yeah, some more comparisons. I'm gonna get the Kucam 8K out and have a go with that. Well, I already have been shooting with that. So we'll take a look at that soon. Also gonna be doing a lot more VR stuff. I just got myself an Oculus Quest. So I'm gonna be doing some stuff with that, making some videos about the games and the experiences you can get with that. So yeah, until next time, let me know what you think in the comments. And if you have any questions, of course, I will answer them. But until then, I will see you next time. Bye.